Chapter 10 Tokens. The word token derives from the Old English "tesen", meaning a sign or symbol. It is commonly used to refer to privately issued, special-purpose coin-like items of insignificant intrinsic value, such as transportation tokens, laundry tokens, and arcade game tokens. Nowadays, tokens administered on blockchains are redefining the word to mean blockchain-based abstractions that can be owned and that represent assets, currency, or access rights. The association between the word token and insignificant value has a lot to do with the limited use of the physical versions of tokens, often restricted to specific businesses, organizations, or locations. Physical tokens are not easily exchangeable and typically have only one function. With blockchain tokens, these restrictions are lifted, or more accurately, completely redefinable. Many blockchain tokens serve multiple purposes globally and can be traded for each other or for other currencies on global liquid markets. With the restrictions on use and ownership gone, the insignificant value expectation is also a thing of the past. In this chapter, we look at various uses for tokens and how they are created. We also discuss attributes of tokens such as fungibility and intrinsicality. Finally, we examine the standards and technologies that they are based on and experiment by building our own tokens. How tokens are used. The most obvious use of tokens is as digital private currencies. However, this is only one possible use. Tokens can be programmed to serve many different functions, often overlapping. For example, a token can simultaneously convey a voting right, an access right, and ownership of a resource. As the following list shows, currency is just the first step. 1. Currency. A token can serve as a form of currency, with a value determined through private trade. 2. Resource. A token can represent a resource earned or produced in a sharing economy or resource-sharing environment. For example, a storage or CPU token representing resources that can be shared over a network. 3. Asset. A token can represent ownership of an intrinsic or extrinsic, tangible or intangible asset. For example, gold, real estate, a car, oil, energy, MMOG items, etc. 4. Access. A token can represent access rights and grant access to a digital or physical property, such as a discussion forum, an exclusive website, a hotel room, or a rental car. 5. Equity. A token can represent shareholder equity in a digital organization, for example, a DAO, or legal entity, for example, a corporation. 6. Voting. A token can represent voting rights in a digital or legal system. 7. Collectible. A token can represent a digital collectible, for example, CryptoPunks, or physical collectible, for example, a painting. 8. Identity. A token can represent a digital identity, for example, avatar, or legal identity, for example, national ID. 9. Attestation. A token can represent a certification or attestation of fact by some authority or by a decentralized reputation system, for example, marriage record, birth certificate, college degree. 10. Utility. A token can be used to access or pay for a service. Often, a single token encompasses several of these functions. Sometimes it is hard to discern between them, as the physical equivalents have always been inextricably linked. For example, in the physical world, a driver's license is also an identity document, and the two cannot be separated. In the digital realm, previously commingled functions can be separated and developed independently. Tokens and fungibility. Wikipedia says, in economics, fungibility is the property of a good or a commodity whose individual units are essentially interchangeable. Tokens are fungible when we can substitute any single unit of the token for another without any difference in its value or function. Strictly speaking, if a token's historical provenance can be tracked, then it is not entirely fungible. The ability to track provenance can lead to blacklisting and whitelisting, reducing or eliminating fungibility. Non-fungible tokens are tokens that each represent a unique tangible or intangible item and therefore are not interchangeable. For example, a token that represents ownership of a specific Van Gogh painting is not equivalent to another token that represents a Picasso, even though they might be part of the same arch ownership token system. Similarly, a token representing a specific digital collectible, such as a specific CryptoKitty, is not interchangeable with any other CryptoKitty. Each non-fungible token is associated with a unique identifier, such as a serial number. We will see examples of both fungible and non-fungible tokens later in this chapter. Note that fungible is often used to mean directly exchangeable for money. For example, a casino token can be cashed in, while laundry tokens typically cannot. This is not the sense in which we use the word here. Counterparty risk. Counterparty risk is the risk that the other party in a transaction will fail to meet their obligations. Some types of transactions suffer additional counterparty risk because there are more than two parties involved. For example, if you hold a certificate of deposit for a precious metal and you sell that to someone, there are at least three parties in the transaction: the seller, the buyer, and the custodian of the precious metal. Someone holds the physical asset. By necessity, they become party to the fulfillment of the transaction and add counterparty risk to any transaction involving that asset. In general, when an asset is traded indirectly through the exchange of a token of ownership, there is additional counterparty risk from the custodian of the asset. Do they have the asset? Will they recognize or allow the transfer of ownership based on the transfer of a token, such as a certificate, deed, title, or digital token? In the world of digital tokens representing assets, as in the non-digital world, it is important to understand who holds the asset that is represented by the token and what rules apply to the underlying asset. Tokens and intrinsicality. The word intrinsic derives from the Latin intra, meaning from within. Some tokens represent digital items that are intrinsic to the blockchain. Those digital assets are governed by consensus rules, just like the tokens themselves. This has an important implication. Tokens that represent intrinsic assets do not carry additional counterparty risk. If you hold the keys for a CryptoKitty, there is no other party holding the CryptoKitty for you. You own it directly. The blockchain consensus rules apply, and your ownership of the private keys is equivalent to ownership of the assets without any intermediary. Conversely, many tokens are used to represent extrinsic things, such as real estate, corporate voting shares, trademarks, and gold bars. The ownership of these items, which are not within the blockchain, is governed by law, custom, and policy, separate from the consensus rules that govern the token. In other words, token issuers and owners may still depend on real-world non-smart contracts. As a result, these extrinsic assets carry additional counterparty risk because they are held by custodians, recorded in external registries, or controlled by laws and policies outside the blockchain environment. One of the most important ramifications of blockchain-based tokens is the ability to convert extrinsic assets into intrinsic assets, and thereby remove counterparty risk. A good example is moving from equity in a corporation to an equity or voting token in a DAO or similar organization.